Three men surrounded the Apache girl. The rancher intervened. "She's with me." When Lyria, the young Apache woman renowned among her people for her courage, entered the dusty trading post on the edge of Clearwater Ridge, she anticipated no conflict, nor did she wear the sort of look that might provoke it. She had come solely to barter the white corn her grandmother had given her to handle, aiming to obtain remedies and a handful of essentials before heading back to her band. Yet the instant she passed through the doorway, she drew the chill, lingering gazes of three fellows who had been idling lazily near the racks. They were cattle hands from a close-by ranch, infamous in the settlement for their haughtiness. Fellows who mistook quiet for frailty and poise for rebellion. And the second their sights fixed on her customary garb, the plates that signified her heritage, and the upright carriage of her spine, their murmurs grew pointed enough to slice across the space. Lyria chose not to notice them, concentrating rather on the goods she meant to exchange for. But the fellows moved from the ledge and gradually spread out around her, as if an implicit cue had traveled among them. She sensed the alteration in their footfalls at her back, the manner in which the atmosphere grew taut, the way the merchant abruptly discovered reasons to avert his eyes. One of the fellows obstructed her route to the ledge and propped himself against a cask with a slick smile, remarking that he couldn't remember spotting her sort so near the village without an escort, as if she were a lost animal that had strayed too distant from safe territory. Another moved to her rear, putting on a display of inspecting the plumes in her tresses while grumbling that such adornments could bring a sum if she were open to haggling. Lyria's chin set firm. Her elders had instructed her to steer clear of clashes with pioneers, not out of dread for them, but since harmony was a delicate matter, all too readily broken by one flash of ire. Still, even she sensed her forbearance unravel as the third fellow drew nearer, setting his boot deliberately close to her foot, enclosing her amid them in a casual, hunting half-ring. She gripped her pail of cornmeal in both fists, not like a tool for defense, but like a tether to hold her mood even. The fellows chuckled to each other, detecting her unease, and the one closest to her side proposed she join them out front so they might suitably greet her to the locale. Lyria raised her head, locking eyes with him without a waver, but right as she opened her mouth to issue her own caution, the entrance behind the fellows burst wide open with the sharp thwack of timber on plaster. A lanky rancher entered, grit still adhering to his jacket, his rowels chiming a tinny peal with every stride, and the mood altered at once. For he wasn't merely any rancher. He was Cole Avery, famed throughout the district not for cruelty or vanity, but for the subdued power of a fellow who had gained esteem without insisting on it. Lyria knew him vaguely. He had traversed Apache territory previously, never breaching limits, always offering a courteous incline to those observing from the heights. Now he paused, assessing the tableau ahead with squinted eyes, and the three fellows grew rigid, though not sufficiently to retreat. "Something amiss here?" Cole inquired, his tone even, yet honed keen enough to pierce their self-satisfied looks. The fellow nearest Lyria chuckled uneasily, and insisted they were just sharing a cordial chat, but Cole advanced nearer, situating himself squarely between Lyria and the one impeding her way. The merchant feigned occupation at the back of the ledge, wishing the strain would fade without pulling him under. Cole glanced at Lyria for a fleeting instant, sufficient to recognize her without turning her into a sideshow, then faced the fellows again and stated with subdued resolve, "She's with me." The declaration struck like a mallet. The fellows eyed one another, uncertain if they should yield or press on. Cole didn't elevate his pitch, didn't grasp for the pistol on his belt. He merely held his ground, unmoving by a fraction, a barrier of assurance they couldn't breach. Lyria felt an unforeseen calm settle within her breast, not reliance, not frailty, but an uncommon feeling of being seen as a person worthy of honor, rather than a novelty or mark. In time, the fellows grumbled pretexts and edged from the ledge, acting as if they had pressing matters elsewhere. Cole didn't track their departure. His stare remained fixed until the echo of their steps dwindled. Then he shifted position, granting Lyria space to proceed unhindered once more. She clasped her pail a touch firmer, uncertain how to express thanks without implying she was in his debt. For in her realm, appreciation needed to be sincere, not a burden. But ere she could utter a word, Cole gestured to the ledge and directed the merchant to complete her exchange, noting she had lingered plenty already. And as she neared the ledge, sensing the burden of peril ease from her frame, she couldn't resist pondering why a fellow with no duty to her, and folks had opted to place himself against 3 others, all for one he scarcely recognized. Lyria finished her barter promptly, mindful that Cole lingered close by, not like a towering protector, but as one confirming the fellows wouldn't return. And when she emerged into the broad expanse past the trading post, she felt the faint throb of their strain still lingering in her blood. Cole trailed her out shortly after, fiddling with the cord of the satchel he bore. And for a few breaths, they remained wordless. It wasn't a strained quiet, just the sort that arises when 2 souls are sifting through notions neither can yet name. Lyria at last faced him, bracing for him to seek recompense or probe about her kin, but Cole merely wondered if her trek lay far. She paused, reluctant to disclose her trail, since confidence wasn't a gift the Apache bestowed lightly, least of all to pioneers. Yet an element in his serene demeanor prompted her to reply truthfully. She was heading to her kin's encampment 2 crests northward. Cole inclined his head and observed the route stood open that day, though the stream by the aged cottonwoods often rose at this season. He wasn't proposing to guide her, simply passing along knowledge, and Lyria discovered herself valuing the nuance. She regarded him in silence, musing why a fellow amid fellow pioneers, most of whom viewed Apache as barriers to growth, bore no malice or presumption in his gaze. Cole noticed her scrutiny, but held steady. Instead, he shared something unforeseen, that he had glimpsed her band from a distance on herd trails, and though he lacked their tongue, he honored how they traversed the earth as if woven into it, not seeking to master it. Lyria weighed his statement with care, seeking to gauge if it rang true or served as mere expedient praise. But the earnestness in his voice seemed rooted, unfeigned, and she grasped that he spoke not to win her favor, but because he held the belief dear. Ere she could answer, a far-off call rang from beyond the trading post's bend, one of the 3 fellows from before, tone heavy with rage. He and the rest resurfaced, striding toward them with a weightier gait than prior, and Lyria at once perceived this clash wouldn't fade so readily as the initial one. Cole moved ahead, but Lyria rested a palm gently on his sleeve, not to halt him, but to signal she wouldn't be shoved aside like one unable to hold her footing. The fellows drew near, their ire honed by the shame of prior dismissal, and the biggest thrusted digit at Cole, charging him with favoring strangers over his own. Cole showed no response, didn't even adjust his bearing. He simply noted he stood with what was just, and justice held firm regardless of who faced him. The fellows weren't content. They pressed in, palms drifting too near their fasteners, sights darting atwixt Lyria and Cole with the strain of fellows weighing if vanity merited strife. Lyria confronted their stares with a composed tranquility drawn from lineages of guardians who had shielded their domains ages before the hamlet rose. She informed them in a murmur soft yet steadfast that she would endure no torment, no menace, nor be deemed prizes to seize. Her inflection halted them, not from regard for her, but since they hadn't foreseen such fortitude voiced so evenly. Cole advanced a lone pace, aligning himself at her flank rather than before, rendering it plain that any ill intent toward her must traverse him first. The fellows wavered, ensnared by the awareness that this bore no resemblance to the simple quarry they had once encircled. Now they confronted 2 whose determination loomed like stone,
One of the fellows grumbled that the affair merited no fuss, but the biggest snarled that yielding once more would paint them frail.
Cole countered that true might wasn't gauged by readiness to oppress the blameless, and the manner of his delivery, neither taunting nor ominous, just resolute, caused the breeze to turn anew. The leanest of the three at last withdrew, grumbling they had worthier pursuits. The next trailed with reluctance, and the third, after a drawn-out hush laced with glares, pivoted with a sour oath. When their steps vanished afar, Lyria and Cole stayed rooted, verifying the peril had ebbed truly. Lyria exhaled a measured breath she hadn't known she'd pent, and regarded Cole with a look mingling thanks with a profounder note, an admission that ties forged amid hazard bore substance. Cole offered a brief incline, voicing relief the matter closed sans spilling blood. Lyria answered that vigor tempered with control proved a scarce trait, and Cole murmured in turn that esteem flowed in both directions. She steadied the parcel of goods now fastened at her hip, readying for the voyage homeward. Cole wished her hopes their trails might intersect again one day, not as savior and saved, but as peers who grasped the heft of joint trials. Lyria eyed him a beat past need, then inclined her head, a motion bearing deeper import than any voiced appreciation. As she ventured toward the vast terrain guiding to her folk, she sensed the realm tilt a fraction, not for peril's flight, but because a span had risen where void had reigned, fortified not by duty or dread, but by honor bestowed unbound.